Oh, it's a prototype. Nice. Can we just play through the prototype?
Yeah, for sure. I might click around and I might make mistakes as I go, but
Okay. So you see the pop-up comes up. I like the subtle animation.
there's this glow in the background that's
Oh, yeah.
super subtle, but we were like, what if we added some motion to that as well? And that gives us a chance to incorporate the branding. So going back to the co-branded thing, what if it changed colors depending on who the partner fintech app actually is? So in this case, you continue, enter your phone number to find your bank accounts. And growth aspect is streamlining it through using passkeys.
Oh, I see. I don't like the animation happening for that.
Yeah. And then in this case, like I said, you're able to, if we recognize enough information about the user, we know that they had a last used account, we can show the balance in it, and then they can select a different one or confirm to continue.
Wow. Folks, welcome to Sneak Peek. And today with me, I have John from Plaid. So I'm super stoked because you're going to be walking us through a growth design project, right?
A few different projects, I would say. Yeah.
Love it. So what's going on here with the Remember Me project? Can you give us a little bit of a history?
Yeah, for sure. I think for most people, you're familiar with Plaid when you're interacting with a fintech app, most commonly maybe a Venmo, Cash App, Coinbase. And most people remember it as a very linear flow, one that maybe you just smashed a button through, a few inputs here and there. But it's been constant and consistent for a number of years. And recently, the company wanted to improve its conversion, but also improve the general user experience. If you look at the company history, there's been a lot of external challenges that they've had to do, especially being in this space where there's institutions, there's legal, there's fintech customers, and then there's the end consumer, which is people like you and me. And so it's a challenging space to be operating in. And before I joined, I was like, why hasn't this user experience developed since the last time I interacted with it? And then joined the company realizing that actually there's a lot going on behind the scenes to try to optimize the experience. There's a lot of obvious error states, things that can fall apart on whether customer side, consumer, or institution. And so Remember Me is an optimization across the end-to-end, what we would call the link flow, which is essentially linking your fintech app to your bank account. We do so in a very straightforward way, in this case, by remembering the user based on phone number or any other metadata that the customer app, in this case, the customer refers to a Coinbase, any fintech app, would provide us. So most commonly, that is a phone number. And what that allows us to do is see if you've also logged into any sort of fintech or connected your bank to any product previously. Think of it as like a returning user or a login with Plaid type of experience.
Can we look at the final designs and then look at the before? So start with the final design and then go all the way back to your first iteration, then walk our way back.
I'll just jump into the end-to-end page. And actually, I have the Figma organized in a way where the cover is at the top, and then what's ready for handoff or review is also at top, front, and center. Everything else below it is essentially what I would consider workspace. And in our case for Remember Me, the screens mostly look pretty similar, but there's nuance to whether flow one being the ideal, the customer app passes the phone number and we match it to a user profile. Whereas flow two is maybe that there's no information we receive from the fintech app, and so the user has to manually enter their phone number to continue. Lastly, maybe we get the phone number, but we don't recognize this user. Then we take them through the flow that most people are familiar with, which is you have to do all the manual steps involved. And with each of these, because it's a final end-to-end state, they should be prototyped up. In this case, actually, I think this is the handoff one. So this was meant to be pixel perfect as opposed to interactive. That would be probably in the polish or future ideas section. Yeah, right here we have a prototype polish section. So we can walk through the end-to-end flow here. Yeah, so this is back to the end-to-end page here.
So when you were starting with this project, like I know you explained the goal behind it, with this being a growth design project. So you already had something you were starting with, right? Like when I look at all these different flows, there was already an existing design. It was not like from scratch you're designing.
That's right. Yeah, there's an existing flow, which I would say for us, the challenge has always been, how do you break away from it in a way that, one, feels familiar, and a sub point to that is doesn't affect conversion, right? Doesn't tank our metrics, but also pushes the bounds on what most people consider a utility, right? We're making home within another person's app. And so there's a lot of toes that we could accidentally step on. And while we might want to try something flashy, sparkly, trendy, whatever, a lot of it is brought back down by we need to be grounded by understanding who our users are and who this would affect potentially, and how many thousands, millions of people on the regular this could affect.
John, I got a question for you. When a designer works on a growth design project like you have here, should they immediately start working with the constraints, or should they think completely like moonshot, explore whatever's out there? How do you personally approach that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question to ask, especially while this is already centered. All this visual exploration, which quite frankly, I think it was apparent to some people wouldn't make the cut right off the bat. And I think it's important because a product, especially like Plaid, a designer can get really caught up in the status quo or the current state of the design, and it's very limiting, right? And especially if you want to grow and develop as a designer, I think it's very important for you to at least take some time to go broad, to explore, try out different concepts, reference some UI that you saw elsewhere and were inspired by. In this case, that was exactly what happened with me, where despite the fact that what we ended up with was by no means the most flashy or visual, it was informed a lot by some of the explorations that were done, whether that be motion, some sort of animation or transition that we really enjoyed, or even the framing of copy. Sometimes when you're messing around with a different layout, right, that informs what the string of text might look like. And in turn, you get good conversation that comes out of that. And so in this case, like a lot of these, I try to switch it up, save your info to Plaid, create your Plaid account, I don't know, verify your phone number. There's so many different ways of how Plaid passes the information along to the customer. And by doing more visual explorations, I think it helps unlock a lot of the creative juices there.
Even in that previous screen, I see the exploration you have, like literally with that JB logo that's big. And then in the previous iteration, you explored like a much subtle one. And then, so I'm just trying to like see like what the different explorations you got going on there.
Yeah, just a lot of different, even in transition states, I think some of these are prototyped out. It's fun to just see what would happen to the pane, what happens to the content, how does information disappear or appear.
Oh, okay. Can you click through the prototype for this one? I'm actually curious to see.
Yeah, let's see if this works. No, it didn't. It's probably broke somewhere along the line. But that happens a lot, right? Maybe one of the other ones that we select will work. I could talk through this one.
All right. What is this concept you're exploring here?
Yeah, and this one, I think we want to show the value of Plaid beyond what people are familiar with today. In fact, the offerings have expanded to identity, security, the ability for you to connect your entire financial identity, not even needing to maybe sign up or log in with an app. If you log in with Plaid, we have your name, the bank's, your phone number, potentially address if you've made transactions via your bank account before. And this one was meant to showcase that Plaid has changed. Plaid has evolved. In this case, perhaps you see this and you want to click through to see what other offerings Plaid has. And so this was a lot of fun. Once again, maybe a little bit too playful. Maybe it doesn't really fit the brand identity. Probably very unsustainable for the long term, especially since there's only 3 cars and they just cycle through. But yeah, I think well worth exploring, because then it starts to generate ideas around what if we framed it as Plaid is so much more than just connecting your bank.
But quick question there. I like how the cards are circling. How did you figure out that maybe having some arrow there would give the user this feedback that, hey, if you click on that arrow, you can circle through the cards rather than just tapping on it? Were there some other explorations you're thinking about?
So that's a great one. This one I didn't even prototype up. I didn't even plug it in, but it was the idea behind this was what if we made it tappable instead, and then the card pops up a little bit. Likewise, if you were to expand this one over here, then maybe this guy condenses back down, and then this guy pops up a little bit, right? It's a super good question, because that's exactly how I was thinking about it. Once you've prototyped it, you're like, all right, that works, but what if it did this instead? And a lot of this is very much informed by, I share it with the team. They're like, oh, it actually feels a little bit too much movement. Let's try something else. And then I go and have fun with that. This is one concept. I think another one that I talked through is, and these are ones, just by the way, side note, I have this page over here called presentations. And these were ones that I took the effort to whip up some conceptual ideas around what Plaid might look like if we collaborated with our customers on maybe a fresh illustration every time, or we just work together. And these are hacked together based on the Robinhood screenshot and what Venmo has on their marketing page. But then for a lot of these concepts, I'll take them and then I'll put them in a presentation ready format. In Plaid, we use Campsite, which is like a team content sharing tool. And I love it. I think it's been super, super helpful within our team for sharing out ideas. And so sometimes I'll just make a page for presentations and add like a interesting background to it, and then get it in an export ready format so that I can present it. Those are for the ideas that I feel a little bit better about, and or maybe I think can inform other members of the team. So that's what the purpose of
Quick
this page
question
is
there.
for.
So I know Brian Levin, the founder of Campsite. Love the guy. In the presentations, can I request you to just quickly open your Campsite app?
Sure.
So I'm curious to know, how do you and Plaid design team use a Campsite to share these updates, the presentation designs?
Yeah, I think it differs from designer to designer. Like I said, in my case, I prefer to show publicly the work that has been polished a little bit. I add a cool background to it. A lot of us use Screen Studio to record our prototypes as well. But there's a range. I think you can see people sharing edits that were made post design review. Other people, it's the framing of content. Here, Isabel, I think, shared slides from a presentation, mostly get feedback on, is this content clear? And so there's some really conceptual designs as well as some more grounded. Here's just updates to something in the dashboard. And then even UXR, I think this has been super helpful in proliferating some of the learnings that we've had on the team, where even UXR folks can share their work. And yeah, I think here's the one that I just shared. This was just a couple of days ago, actually. Yeah, mostly it's a range from works in progress to, in my case, very buttoned up designs. Even in this one, it's something silly like Plaid AI for our hackathon. I didn't add any context to it. I was just like, here it is, right? Yeah, so I think for us, it fosters the desire to share your work, but also we get some cross-functional comments that come in, people that get very excited about through another, and being able to solicit feedback in this async way, which I think you can't get in a crit necessarily because not everyone can join at the same time.
I got a noob question because I don't use Campsite. What is the benefit of using Campsite versus just DMing people in Slack and letting them know that, hey, this is the new update that I did?
Yeah, I think it's a weightier version of sharing your work. I think in Slack, the content gets lost in the mix, especially depending on how active a channel or a group chat might be. For our design channel, I think there's a lot of social content, right? Yeah, it could be good and you get very quick reactions in Slack, but maybe people don't acknowledge it with the amount of time it deserves. Whereas Campsite is a dedicated space for it, where we invite, engineering, products, everyone to take a look and keep up to date on some of the goings on. And what I love about it is it fosters what I just said, the ability to share really high fidelity or low fidelity work and UXR findings, recordings, all that stuff.
Perfect. Got it.
We love using Campsites. That's not even exaggeration. I can go back to the content of, was it Workspace? Yeah. So you can see a lot of these are not what Plaid looks like today. When I say that the purpose of this is one to like help you broaden your explorations as a designer, or to think outside the box and not be constrained by the status quo, a lot of times it'll have to be brought back down to earth with conversations with PMs, engineering, what are the technical constraints, but then also for Plaid especially, what are the legal constraints and how does this affect the people both on the financial institution side, fintech side, and consumer side. And these are also helpful in getting guardrails, right? A lot of these we might think looks the coolest, but then some very well-informed people will tell us that this would affect the design. You might need way more content around legal, right? This might need to be paragraphs if you try to make it a one-click experience. And while I think it's worthwhile to go broad and visually explore, what ended up happening with this project actually was more so us narrowing it down to 3 different concepts. And in this case, there's a linear flow, which is the most common but updated version of what people expect today. There's also a one-step flow, which is probably limited to a select type of user, one that we have a lot of information about, has used Plaid once or twice, has connected, has a primary default bank account, or one version where we try to combine it with the most number of interactions. So you can maybe add an account, learn more, and edit your profile. There's these 3 concepts that we landed on, which I think feels a lot more like Plaid compared to some of the other visual explorations that we did. But the learnings come along the way, right? And I think people really loved the fact that there was this transition states of the cards, and we felt, what if we were able to incorporate more animation into the flow? Right now, it's a lot of full panes. You tap it and then just transitions over to the next one, and that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot going on. And so I would say worthwhile exercise in exploring, because then that tells us that we do want to pursue this direction where there is more movement or motion in our designs.
I gotta say, some of those explorations that you had were so slick and cool. I'm like, why did it not make the cut? It was so cool seeing some of them.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And so I think this segues us pretty nicely into what the final design we ended up with looks like. And that would be the one on the left. I'll just jump to the end to end here, where I think the prototype is all neatly packaged. Yeah. And this is a specific use case. Obviously, we want to demonstrate what Plaid looks like within one of our customer apps. And so here's the experience within Xfinity.
Oh, is a prototype nice? Like, can we just play through the prototype?
Yeah, for sure. I might click around and I might make mistakes as I go, but
Okay. So you see the pop-up comes up. I like the subtle animation.
there's this glow in the background that
Oh
is super
yeah.
subtle, but we're like, what if we added some motion to that as well? And that gives us a chance to incorporate the branding. So going back to the co-branded thing, what if it changed colors depending on who the partner fintech app
Yeah.
actually is? So in this case, you continue, enter your phone number to find your bank accounts. And another growth aspect is streamlining it through using passkeys.
Oh, I see. I don't like the animation happening for that.
Yeah. And then in this case, like I said, you're able to, if we recognize enough information about the user, we know that they had a last used account, we can show the balance in it, and then they can select a different one or confirm to continue.
Wow. So I quickly want to see what the before version looked like, because I know we were looking at the final version. We just looked at the final version, but what does the before version look like?
Yeah, let me just drop it in here right underneath. So it looked a lot more like this, which some of our viewers may be familiar with. But like I said, not a lot of motion going on, static panes for the most part, a lot of lists, and a very linear flow. And so I think to bring it all together, so many learnings that we had from just going broad and exploring concepts that we were able to pick and choose specific aspects of to incorporate into the final design. And so, yeah, there's a pretty big difference in what you're seeing, despite the fact that for many people, it doesn't seem like the flashiest or fanciest type of design or animation.
I think there's a lot of animation, motion design that's going on. I almost feel like I want to see how you prototype this entire polished version. And I want to hear your reasoning behind that. Like, maybe it was just instinctual, or you were just like, hey, I feel this is the right way, or this is too much. But I just want to hear like how you animated a lot of these things.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to prototyping it out, we start with the concept, right? I think the concept for this one, like I mentioned, was there's a glowing effect. That's how we can inject a tiny bit of the customer's branding into it. In this case, we had to make the glow its own individual component, and I think it's just some ellipses that are shifting around behind this massive ellipse here. These are a little bit easier, where we start with centering the customer brand, and then it splits up into this bank thing to indicate that this is Xfinity connecting to your bank account via Plaid. And so a lot of these decisions are made with what sort of would convey it in a very subtle way, probably in a way that a designer would notice and an everyday user might not. And that's totally fine. A lot of these are transitions in the pane itself, as well as fading in and out a lot of the CTAs. And so for this is pretty straightforward. I think you have the iOS system pane that pops up. But then for some of them that are automated, we set the timing of like authentication, for instance, going back to that comment about how long might this actually take. We set it to something that's pretty realistic so that the animation plays out. And then there's a couple more interactions to demonstrate. You can drag this pane up, or clicking onto this will select a different bank account. Very basic ones as well.
So how does one get better at motion design? There's a lot of motion animation design going on here, especially the ellipsis happening, the glow. How does one nail that or figure out this is the best way to do it if they don't have prior experience?
The way that I did it was just by taking time on every project to prototype something out. And it can be very daunting, even for me now. Like the cards one, I had an idea of what it's supposed to look like. The card goes down when you tap the button, and then the next one pops up. You have to make one shift down on the y-axis, and the next one needs to enlarge in size, and so you need to adjust its proportions. All that takes a lot of time, and quite frankly, in Figma, it can be a lot of work, but I think it's often very worth it, because all the stuff that I've talked about, I think we have a design team and philosophy that facilitates or encourages people to make these explorations, right? If I show an animation recording, I'm fairly certain more people will look at it on Campsite than if I just shared a static mock, right? So there's a lot in place that has made it encouraging for designers to explore motion. And I think that's super important for a design team. But when it comes to the individual, oftentimes when I see something, an interaction or an animation in the wild, sometimes you just got to go back and do a screen recording and then scrub super specifically to see, how did this thing fade? out, or how did this thing transition into a different state? And then you keep that in your back pocket and look for opportunities to incorporate it into your work. They say good artists steal, or was it great artists steal? I'm constantly stealing like these little tidbits from other well-designed products, and I think that's fair game in this industry, unless you're completely stealing someone's concept. We can cut out that part. I got lost in the sauce there. We can cut that out.
Is there like any internal documentation on motion design that you have to follow, or is it just like you're ballparking what feels right to you?
It's a little bit of both. Honestly, if you were to ask Smitty, who's one of our design systems designers, I probably have broken every rule in the book in terms of the motion. But we do have that documentation in our Threads design system. We have a components library, and I have this ready right here, where we have UI motion documentation in the form of these slides, but also that is referencing different companies, right? Other inspiring organizations out there. A lot of it is informed by the material design documentation of like literally down to the mathematics around how it should look. But for the most part, when it comes to the way I do it, I will probably just do a smart animate and mess with the timing of the default easing in and out.
But I love this documentation. Like it just gives me like for someone that's not an expert in motion design, I look at the documentation for Spectrum ease in under external audit. It just tells me that, hey, use this effect, Spectrum ease in, for fade out stuff. So at least now I know that if I want a card that's going to fade out of view, use Spectrum ease in.
Exactly. And I think you can get as deep or as shallow in this stuff as you want to. In my case, like I said, I love the fact that we have all this documentation, but for the most part, when it's in the exploratory phase, I won't get too complex. When it's time to button it up and add it to our component library or something, yeah, definitely that's when you have to go and reference and make sure it's perfect down to the pixel.
How long did the project take, this entire growth design
project? I think
project?
we did a bunch of little sprints, right? A lot of it might be visual exploration or digging into some UXR. One thing that I hadn't had the chance to mention yet is I also typically will have a page here for research. And so a lot of times you'll run just quick experiments, right? And this page I'm totally fine leaving messy and comments and whatnot. Along the way, there was some research done. And so I would say the course of this entire project was a little over half a year.
Wow. And then in this research page, are these prototypes that you're sharing for user testing, or are you documenting the feedback from research? What's happening in the research page?
Yeah, this is the workspace for the prototype that the researcher would use in whatever interview that they're having with consumers.
Got it. Perfect.
Yeah. So that even we got the answer this question at the very end of the flow. Like it's been worked into, these prototypes.
Okay. Thank you so much, John. This was amazing just to see the whole journey of growth design project from start to finish.
Happy to share.
Hey, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watched this video. If you want to unlock the AI design and growth design interviews with designers at some of the top companies in the world, then head on over to sneakpeek.design and subscribe to the newsletter.